Welcome to a bonus episode of the third season of the Simply Verified Beef podcast. The title of this episode is Trusted Team, and we're going to be discussing how to best manage people on a farm to achieve the best results for both two and four-leggeds alike. Our guests for this episode are Ashley Nicholls, the animal health field lead for TELUS Ag and the founder of Reach Agriculture Strategies, and Dr. Michelle Calvo-Lorenzo, the chief animal welfare officer for Elanco. Let's get started. All right, so we'll jump in just by asking both of you to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from, and what you do.
So I'm Michelle Calvo-Lorenzo, and I work for Elanco Animal Health. I've been with Elanco now for 9 years, and I reside in Ohio, so northeast part of the United States. And I come to Elanco after many years of being in the ag industry, way too many years in school with a few degrees. And growing up in Miami, Florida, where there is no agriculture. So very odd background, but somehow in some way it all kind of shapes out, I think, to provide me what I need to continue learning and staying ambitious in animal agriculture. So my job at Elanco, what I get to do every day is help provide a lot of leadership, direction, and technical support to our farm animal business at Elanco relative to all things animal welfare. So really working not just externally with all of our farm animal customers, but also internally with a lot of our leaders, with a lot of our different business divisions, as well with a lot of our sales representatives, as well as technical folks.
Yeah, so I'm Ashley Nicholls, originally from Australia, born and raised there. I came to Canada in 2011 for a 3-month summer, and that accidentally turned into 13 years. So I've been in Alberta pretty much the whole time. Started guiding out in the mountains in Kananaskis at various summer camp facilities. Ended up working with the University of Calgary at WA Ranches for a couple of years, and then landed with TELUS Agriculture. So with TELUS, I'm the animal health field lead. So I have a team of consultant assistants. We head out to local client sites and collect a lot of information for the consultants to make decisions with, including postmortems, feed sampling, and different things like that. And I'm splitting my time right now between that and my new venture that I've just recently started called Reach Agriculture Strategies, which is a company that's providing communication training and culture development services to agriculture operations.
Awesome. Staying right along with that, the next question I had for you, Ashley, was what is Reach Ag? And can you tell us a little bit more about its mission and what you do with farmers?
Yeah, that's the perfect segue. So Reach Ag provides communication training and culture development consulting to ag operations. So our mission is to empower operations to cultivate sustainable and resilient cultures, increase staff retention, and enhance hiring practices. It's no secret that we have a communication blockage in ag. We're all a little bit better at talking to livestock than we are at talking to each other. So during my time with the Canadian Young Leaders Program, I worked with Michelle, who was my mentor, to kind of focus my ideas in a way that could benefit the industry as a whole and have a lasting impact on our people and our livestock. So the approach that we take at Reach is it's a little outside the box. We're looking at everything from job descriptions to break rooms to reporting structures to bathrooms, really changing up kind of how we look at our operations. So we're using various tools, including the DISC personality assessment tool. The idea being that we can give everyone kind of a baseline knowledge of how their personality fits in with team members and how we can all work the best together.
And wondering maybe if you could just talk about how you connect with the farmers and kind of how you start that process. How do they reach out to you? What does the starting point look like?
Yeah, so we've got three main programs. The first program is the Everything DISC personality assessment, which I talked about, which can be utilized completely on its own, just to develop that communication and kind of get the pathways flowing. The second one is the Ag Ready program, which is developing training and onboarding programs for operations, and that's very specific to just the training on onboarding piece. The third program is agriculture strategies, and that's agra/ culture. Difficult to get a bit of a wordplay in when the entire word is the same thing. But the Agriculture Strategies Program takes an entire review of the operation and does a full breakdown. So that's what I was talking about with everything from reporting structures to bathrooms, having a full look at what the environment is like for the staff, and then working with management to create those communication chains, create those organization charts, those job descriptions, the training and onboarding systems, and making sure that kind of the people systems in our ag operations make sense and are effective for the people on the ground.
We talk a lot about that within the Verified Beef Production Plus standard, and sometimes it's kind of the low man on the totem pole. It's something that we don't prioritize or something that we don't relate to. So I think it's really great to hear that there's a program out there to help producers kind of put this into their own terms and think about the people behind the operation for sure. Michelle, I want to jump to you next. So we've heard that both of you are quite involved in the animal health space, and we've heard now how Ashley kind of connects to the people side of things, but curious how your work and your career overlap with the concept of people and people management.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ash basically discussed a lot of these newer phrases, terms, or approaches that I'm so proud that he's working on these things, because for a long time, at least from like the scientific standpoint, where you've got your researchers and you've got your veterinary community working day in and day out to create all the right protocols, to create all the right standards that, yes, check off the box for animal health, for food safety, consumer concerns, and all those things relative to animal welfare. But then, you know, the space of animal welfare science has really evolved too, to really think about improving the quality of life for animals on any farm. Meanwhile, what we're realizing is that a lot of the gaps or problems and challenges that all of our farm animal industries are dealing with, and this isn't just a US problem or a problem in Canada, it really is something that I think can be considered global, is this gap in connecting animals, which we've continued to be focused on from the animal welfare standpoint, and the one thing that touches them every single day, no matter what phase of production that they're in, and that's people. To answer your question, there is clearly an overlap that many of us have overlooked in the industry, where people and animals are absolutely connected. There is no doubt, and any rancher or producer would tell you, of course, people have a direct impact on our animals. But for some odd reason, we've kind of overlooked how we can further develop the people, right? We've got to reassess how we do all of those things when we interact with them, when we hire them, when we hopefully acknowledge them, when we have the problem of a continued rotating door of employees, right? One as complex as animal welfare is going to continue to perpetuate that. If we don't fix the core issue, we're going to continue to find ourselves trying to justify what we do, why we do it, and hope that everyone's accepting of it. And I think we have a lot of science that backs a lot of what we do, but the problem is what's on the protocols, what's on the standards or the guidelines, even though as well as those may be written or scientifically based, the implementation of them is where I think we've got our most gaps. And that means people trying to follow, trying to understand, trying to reason how and when to apply the things in their protocols or what they've been trained on. That's the opportunity. And so that's really where the past several years, and when I got connected with Ashley, it was just, it's been opportunity after opportunity to help people start bringing together a lot of what we know in the social sciences, in the psychology of people, and then obviously everything we know in like the HR world of corporations, right? To bring all of that together to help a lot of our ranchers and producers really understand how to work with their people. So for instance, Ashley talked a lot about things like personality tools. No one's ever thought about that in our industry, right? And it's just incredible seeing all the aha moments that folks are having just because we can help them change their ability on how to work as a team, how to embrace culture, and then how to how to then overcome the hurdles of actually accomplishing the expectations of their protocols or job responsibilities every day, right? And that's super, super important, because without them having that motivation and then feeling valued for doing that, again, that direct touch point, they interact with every single animal. And it's important that every time they have that interaction, that it's positive and that it's appropriate for so many reasons. And so I think that this whole idea of low stress people handling, I think it's brilliant when Ash actually put that together and tried to frame it in a way that us in animal agriculture can really embrace it and understand it, and then even more importantly, implement it. Because I think we've done a pretty decent job as an industry utilizing the low stress animal handling principles, but we've never really applied it to our people, right? And that's the biggest opportunity I think we have in animal agriculture, and tying everything that's important to long-term viability of a business on a farm with even something as important as animal welfare.
I love that you talked about, the importance of people. We have a lot of science-based standards in Canada, and the VBP Plus program. We talk about protocols, standards, all based on science, which is great. But that you point out that people are the root of that and are the limiting factor in implementing it and how well that turns out. You both mentioned that you were a mentorship pairing under the Canadian Cattle Young Leaders program. So I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit about how you got connected through the program and what your mentorship focused on.
Yeah, so I think that piece starts with me. So when I was at selections for the CYL program, we're at CBIC in Calgary, and I was chatting with my kind of co-semi-finalists and talking about what they wanted to get out of the program. And a lot of them were talking about production-based goals. So, direct-to-consumer beef and selecting heifers and feed programs and nutrition and all these very tangible operations, production-related things. I don't own any cattle myself. My wife has enough horses and won't let me get any cows yet. So for myself, it was about looking a little bit outside the box at the impact that I can have on the industry without directly being in the barn. So I was chatting with some previous years participants who at their spring forum had heard Michelle talk about very similar concepts and how people relate to welfare. And I had several people jumping up and down, coming to find me, telling me that I already was lined up with a mentor. So thankfully, then they contacted Michelle, and it kind of followed from there.
Yep, and it was an awesome email for me to receive and a no-brainer for me to serve in this role. I did tell Ashley that sometimes, when you're busy with your full-time job and you want to have the opportunity to at least help coach and inspire someone through a mentorship, you kind of want to be a little careful, because sometimes you sign up more than you expect, depending on the work ethics, right, of young mentees. But the topic in itself was focused on just what we're talking about today. And I said, I'll take the risk. I don't care. And then I read his background and I saw how he was in some ways similar like me. And I said, this is going to be really cool, because we both grew up in very different areas. And now we're honing in on this one thing that we both are very passionate about and that not many in the industry have really embraced yet. So it's worth a chance. And so it was really fun to receive the email and then meet with Ashley. And I mean, I think we met every 2 to 3 weeks for the entire mentorship, and every conversation has always been enjoyable, very fun, really enlightening. I mean, I learned a lot from him too. It wasn't just a one-way. I mean, I think he learned something from me, but I certainly learned a lot from him too. And it's just, again, finding folks that are passionate. Absolutely. I mean, Ashley really had a lot of ambitious goals he wanted to achieve in this mentorship, and he nailed them. He got all of them done. I mean, this has been one of the most productive mentorships I've been a part of. And what he's setting out to do with his program, Reach Ag, is incredible. And I know he's going to hit the ground running and be super successful, because he's filling a gap that truly everyone needs. And he's very experienced and hardworking to help achieve what he needs to do to get this program to everyone that would really like to desire those kinds of outcomes. So when I got the email, I was ecstatic. And it's been such a fun opportunity. And the CCYL program, again, fantastic program. This was my second year being a part of it. And I have absolutely loved every capacity that I've served and everyone that I've met.
Sounds like it was a match made in heaven, kind of meant to be.
Yeah.
It really worked out that way.
I want to jump in next to a term that Michelle mentioned briefly there, and a term that you've kind of coined, Ashley, the term low stress people handling. I'm wondering if you can explain what that term means to you a little bit more and how it relates to Reach Ag and what you're doing with farmers.
Yeah, so I first heard that term at a cattle handling clinic that I took, and somebody just kind of said it as a kind of a throwaway comment. And I heard that, and it just buried into my brain, and has been stuck there ever since. But it's the basis of everything that we've worked on in this mentorship, and the basis of where Reach Ag has come from. We've all heard the term low stress cattle handling, the concept developed by Temple Grandin. It's kind of become the standard for livestock handling, not just in the beef world, but in sheep and pigs and chickens and animal welfare in general. It's obviously incredibly effective, and there's so many parallels between livestock and people. It relates to all facets of an operation. You know, the way we view cattle handling systems versus the way we view our break rooms and bathrooms. Everyone knows we shouldn't dead end the chute. That's the classic cattle handling term. But how often do we think about dead ending a career or limiting someone's professional development or career advancement? And I think one of the strongest benefits to this too is that we as livestock handlers, we know how to do low stress cattle handling, low stress livestock handling. So it's a very relatable term and something that can be framed as very familiar. And it makes it a lot less daunting when you have something that's so familiar to you. It's a lot easier to reframe that into your people.
I particularly love that term for just what you just mentioned. As we've talked about already today, livestock we typically understand better than people a lot of the time. So it's great that you put that into terms that folks can understand in a way that relates to them and doesn't feel like something that's meant for the corporate world. It's meant for them. I want to jump next back to Michelle and talk about some of the science behind low stress people handling. And ask, how does managing people impact the animals under our care, and what kind of evidence is out there for those impacts?
Yep, absolutely. So surprisingly, there is scientific data that we have that shows when, and some of this is in the psychology literature as well, but there is data that shows for dairy cattle, for beef cattle, for layer, broilers, even swine, when we have a particular type of belief or attitude as a human caretaker, and that belief and attitude stems from a negative place, the behaviors that result from that mindset are then negatively imposed on the animal. So for instance, something simple like there's an elevated amount of electric prod use, there's an elevated amount of aggression, or a negative attitude towards an animal that may not be moving fast enough, or going in the direction where a person wants them to go. And so we have this data, and it's maybe almost 20 years old now. It's actually not new, and it's also, guess what, not rocket science. When you go into any situation in life and your mindset is set, your behaviors will reflect where your mind is at, especially when all you're doing all day long for very long work shifts is interacting with all of these animals. And there's going to be stubborn ones, there's going to be difficult ones, there's going to be stressed ones. And we absolutely know that all of these animals, all these livestock, they are 100% domesticated by humans. They require humans for their needs and their wants. Therefore, they need us. There's no mistake made there. They need us, and we have to do things in order to get them what they need. Their feed, if they need to go get medicine, if they need to go get transported, they need us in order to have all those things happen, right? Again, not rocket science. So if you can then come in and help folks better understand maybe a better job role that they're best suited for, i.e. like the personality traits that Ash mentioned earlier, or if we have a cultural problem where you have folks that can't communicate or understand understand exactly what it is they're expected to do. Or even worse, they have no experience with these types of animals and don't fully understand why they behave the way they do, because they've never really been educated on how an animal sees the world around them as a prey animal, right? So if we can convert that mindset to be positive, to be confident in an appropriate way, right? To feel motivated, to do all of the right things with that positive mindset and come to work feeling like they're part of a workplace culture that, again, is positive, is professional, and values them as an individual that's part of a larger family, right? You're then going to have that very simple psychological process work out better most times than not, meaning this person's going to come in with a respect for the animals, from not just an animal welfare perspective, but also from a safety perspective, which is very important for people as well, right? This person's going to come in, they're going to hopefully interact very positively with those animals. If they are not comfortable or don't know what they're supposed to do, they'll have that confidence to seek that help or ask the questions or get more training to do that right and do it appropriately without feeling worried they're going to lose their job, without feeling worried they're going to be laughed at, right? There's a lot of very wonderful benefits that come out of just that simple change in the mindset, which again goes back to this scientific data we have in the literature that shows when you have a more positive mindset, attitude, and set of beliefs towards the animals you would work with, fear levels of animals and the behavioral expression of any one of those species is always more positive. That data shows us that there is absolutely this important interaction with how people, the caretakers, every single day. And then thanks again to a lot of the scientists as well as veterinarians that have been in this space of livestock welfare and livestock behavior, we understand that these animals, when they receive negative experiences, they remember that. And then they become much more temperamental, much more high risk, much more difficult, and more prone to disease or death, right? And they also become someone else's problem when they're then getting on a trailer and going to someone else, right? So all of these things have been in the scientific literature. And so we need to revisit them and find those tools, find those opportunities to reshape that first piece, the mindset, the attitude, and the belief of each individual caretaker. And I would even expand that to everyone on the farm, the mechanic, the feed truck driver, the welder, everyone, the managers that sit in the office, right? All of them should really understand and embrace a lot of this as a culture, as a team, as a family, because then everyone's got, they're all bought in, if you will, and they're all working on one team together and they all understand what they're all working towards, right? So I think that's really where the scientific data stems from and where we need to keep revisiting that, maybe expanding it a little bit more. Our animals have changed over the years, but the basics are still there. It's all starting from that mental state, and all the actions we see carried out on a farm are always going to be reflective of that, right? We can't be responsible for what happens at home or off the farm, but we can certainly help provide support, right, where it's needed, and help those people at least feel happy coming to work and working in an environment that they feel valued and that they want to come back to every day. And it's a for sure that my team will be here tomorrow. Not oh boy, I hope these three guys show up today, because if not, we don't have what we need to get anything done, right? So that's a pretty good overarching scope of what's in the literature. And so I think there's opportunities to improve on it. But we certainly have something to focus on and build from. That's for sure.
And I think that to kind of piggyback on that, the concept Michelle and I have talked a lot about is we've focused a ton on animal to animal interaction. We've focused somewhat on human to animal interaction, but we need to start taking a bit of a deeper look at the human to human interaction and how that has that carry on effect. Because obviously it has the massive implications, exactly like Michelle said. It's the mechanic, it's the truck drivers, it's the feed truck drivers. And then you start looking at from a bigger perspective and your family operations and succession and change in management. You know, if you can have all of the best lawyers and accountants on the books that are ready with this succession plan, if everyone hates each other, none of it matters. You can bring everyone to the table and have all of the numbers worked out, but at the baseline of it, it's about human interaction. And then again, what Michelle was saying about, I hope that these three guys are here today because otherwise the operation's in trouble. It's also about setting a real baseline in our operations. That baseline can come from your VBP standards. It can come from those audits, but it's a lot easier to manage your day-to-day if everybody is on the same page at the beginning of the day. Everyone understands that this is the standard that we set at this yard, that this is how we run our day-to-day operation. If we have a baseline understanding of what's happening, it makes all of the extra stuff a ton easier to deal with. And then all of the stuff that gets thrown at you day to day when the feed truck breaks down or when the water bowls start to freeze, we've already had a baseline, and it makes everything else just that much easier. Everyone can get a little less excited when things start to go wrong, and that just keeps everyone happy.
Absolutely. And I'll take it a step further too, because I appreciate so much that Ashley really does hone in on that, making sure the human-to-human interaction, that if we focus on that, that enhances the human-animal interaction. And it's, again, going back to being able to help them handle when things go bad, when things go south, when you've got disastrous storms or disastrous equipment failure, and you have animals that perish, or disease outbreaks, right? And helping people overcome some of those really, really traumatizing hurdles. I know I'm talking about an extreme here, but we could take a very simple example. The person that's responsible for euthanizing animals day in and day out, that's a lot of trauma, and that's a lot of stress that's imposed on one individual, right? And helping them overcome some of that, again, it's all about the mental state, and hoping he comes back, and hopefully he's also training other people to help take that burden off of him, and helping spread some of that so that everyone can do what's right by the animals at the most timely opportunity when it comes to things like euthanasia, right? So there is a lot about this space where we do need to change the approach, where we stay focused on the human to human interactions, so that the humans individually can have more positive interactions with their animals, never forgetting the bonds they may be making with their teammates, but also with the animals, and helping that job responsibility that they're expected to carry out be not as burdensome, and that they actually own it, that they own that job. They feel like a technical person, which they are, that they're a professional, not just, a processor. They're actually a professional in that space. They have a very unique skill set. They're proud of what they do, and every day they work hard to not just get it done right, but to do it better every single day moving forward, right? That's how you hone in on all of that. You think about the human to human, you think about the human and animal interactions, and with the science that's behind all of that, there's a lot of opportunities to really enhance all of those spaces.
I love, Michelle, that you talk about it not being rocket science, because I think as you are talking through examples, both of you, I think, yep, I know somebody that's gone through that experience, or I've experienced it myself. I think we can all think of a time where maybe family members started arguing, and you can see the impact that has on the cattle handling. So it really is something that's so deeply tied to all of our lives every day. It feels foreign to us when we talk about it, but it's really not. And I think having this conversation and how we tie it to ranchers and producers' everyday lives and the work that gets done every day is so important. I think too, these days we talk a lot more about mental health, but also, like you mentioned, Ashley, succession planning. And we're starting to think more in a lot of ways about people and the relationships between people, and how that really does impact very important business decisions on our operation, because we can't get the work done if our mental health isn't where it needs to be. And of course, succession planning, if we can't get to an agreement, you stand to lose the farm. So very, very high stakes impact of those people to people interactions that we're talking about. I want to jump next into, we've talked about some of the impacts that can go wrong, and the importance of those human to human interactions on human animal interactions, but want to start to talk about some things that producers can do to best cultivate a positive environment for the people on their operation, which I know is a big question, and it's kind of all that you're trying to do, Ashley. So some small things on, and maybe a place to start on how to best cultivate that positive environment.
Step one, call me and we'll work together. But I've got three main points here. and I'll go through them quick and then kind of explain training and onboarding programs, professional development opportunities, and communicate. Those are my three kind of keystones. They're pretty simplistic, straightforward things to follow. Training and onboarding programs, let's set our staff up for success. We've all had a situation where you show up to an operation. This may or may not be my own story. You drive out, you get driven out in the middle of a field at a feed truck. They show you the feed truck. They say, "Can you drive that?" And you say no. And then we replace the gearbox in a couple of weeks because all of a sudden you put someone who doesn't know how to operate a piece of machinery in the piece of machinery and they blew up the transmission. It was just one transmission though, so that's good. But it could have saved us tons of time and tons of money had somebody just sat down with this hypothetical person for an hour and walked them through how to drive a feed truck. It seems at the time, I think we take a pretty short-handed approach and a short view of how to get our staff prepared for the day-to-day. And it feels like if we spend an hour now, it's going to throw our entire day off and it's going to take, ruin the rest of the day. Not thinking about that long-term effect of having to replace the transmission in the feed truck. If we can spend an extra hour now, we can save ourselves a ton of time and money a little bit later. So training and onboarding is hugely important. And on top of that, it reduces ramp-up time for new employees. You've got employees that are fully functioning and ready to go in a much shorter amount of time, so that when you do have that turnover, it is inevitable. We'll do what we can to prevent it. But when that does happen, we get people back up to scratch as soon as they can, so that everyone's on the same page. Professional development opportunities. I spoke earlier about don't dead end the chute, right? That comes back to that low stress cattle handling. If you dead end the chute or you dead end somebody's career, it creates the same angst, the same issues, right? There's nothing worse than hearing, well, that person's going to that conference because they have whatever ticket, or they need this, they need that, and made to feel like you're less important, made to feel like you're just the processor, just the feed truck driver. There's huge opportunity for development to get exposed to the greater industry, giving yourself career growth, to send someone, give someone an hour to spend time on a webinar, or to spend a bit of money and invest in your people to send someone to a conference. It might not seem like a big deal to you as the owner or the manager. Sometimes we get a little jaded to a lot of these professional development opportunities. But I know for myself, when I was a ranch hand and I got the opportunity to go to a cattle handling clinic, that completely changed my view of kind of how I was seen as a ranch hand at the operation, and made me really take some pride in what I was doing day to day. So financially, it doesn't cost a lot of money to develop these professional opportunities. And as far as the time and such is concerned, again, let's take kind of a longer viewpoint into that and see that if you send someone away for a couple of days, you're developing that loyalty in that person, and you're going to gain them for potentially years of employment. So those professional development opportunities are huge. The third piece being communicate. That's pretty straightforward. I mean, we always talk about it. There's the classic thing in ranching, I'm not yelling at you, I'm just yelling to you. But if we take a couple of minutes before we start working those heifers, maybe we won't have to yell at all if we understand which gate needs to be shut. But understanding what's happening day to day is the key to setting a good platform at an operation. If the guy who's in the feed truck and the manager and the person answering the phones and the guy out on the combine, if they all have a base level understanding of the workings day to day, it doesn't take much for everyone to be a little bit more calm, a little bit more chill with what's going on. It's pretty easy sometimes when you're, knee deep in mud fixing a water bowl and you look over and somebody's just casually riding across the pasture. It's easy to look at them and go, oh, they don't even do anything. What are they doing? Why are they working? But if you had a 5-minute, meeting in the morning and said, we're having some health issues in this group of cows, we need to make sure that we're working with them and checking on them, you understand what's going on, and that's just a lot easier for everyone.
If I could add to this, because the three things that Ashley talked about, I think really they establish what a culture should look like. It's not just the typical, checking the box for the milestones you achieve when you hired a person, and then the things you do to hopefully get them experience so that they, move up the ladder or they stay put for long. This is really about establishing a culture, which really, really is important. And I think in my experience and in everything that I'm seeing Ashley develop, it really is the basis for having any type of success, and not just what you hope your farm hands to do day in and day out, but to keep them and keep your business running. A lot of the times when we hear about all of these different types of options in how we train our people, or how we hire our people, how we try to retain the people, right? I think oftentimes it's like Ash said earlier, we lose sight of the value of investing more time in each of those steps, which is time for that person to get feedback, to really and fully understand the family that they're joining, right? It's not just what their job role is, but how their job role is part of the team that they're on, and how that affects the team and the outcomes and their bonuses and the paychecks and so forth and so forth. So I think it's just always really important to think about, how do we establish this culture? And so in order to do that, I think the one thing that we often forget, as Ash said earlier, is investing more time in each of the steps, whatever steps it is that you're going to take, being a leader in there, and just understanding what is the why behind what everything every person does. Understand the why, not just the how and what. It's understanding the why. And I think that when you take the time to explain why we do something, or why this team is here to do this, or why this business exists, all the whys you can think about as a manager, as an owner, and really help the workforce understand those things, you're going to hit a lot more home runs than not with this team, and see it really last more long term, because everyone is bought in, everyone's part of it, everyone really, again, that confidence gets built, the positivity in how people conduct themselves, how they carry themselves, how they help one another. They all feel really compelled because they're part of something bigger than themselves. And, one thing we haven't talked about yet is this variability in the workforce. And so, for instance, here in the US, we have a lot of diversity in the people that work in the farms. And so I find a lot of success, even though I am bilingual, I find a lot of success when I go on the farm and work with or train or audit people, not because I speak their language, but because I know how to connect with them. And connecting with people, again, it goes back to this human-human interaction, having empathy, understanding the industry, understanding where these people are coming from, and being able to have open, honest communication, right? Ashley's third bucket, communication, and being able to do that, right? And that just comes from, again, understanding the demographics, understanding the people, understanding the job roles that they're in, and how to help them get to where they need to go, right? So again, that's all things that people think are feeling related and are sentimental and things, and it doesn't have to be. It can be purely objective. There's a lot of policies that have metrics. They have, very easy ways of measuring these things, figuring out where you're making progress, where you can identify gaps for improvement, and so forth. But it really does all tie back into this idea of culture. And if you can really build that and start there from the moment people come in and are joining your operation, the sky's going to be the limit in how you build that and how you determine success. So I think that this can tend to feel overwhelming, but again, there's lots of resources like AgReach, right? And being able to bring in experts that understand this and can help you work through some of those areas that you're not too familiar with or want to know more about the resources available.
I want to build off of what you're saying there about culture and just the idea of connecting human to human there, Michelle, because I think that's important in that I think a lot of operations that we talk to on a regular basis, they maybe don't see how some of this fits in with them because they think, well, we're a husband and wife operation, we're parents and kids, how am I dead ending someone's career or dead ending the shoot when, it's my kid, I'm not their boss. But all of these principles do apply. I was talking with a rancher and he was saying, man, my wife really gets frustrated with me when we're working cattle together. And I said, well, that's her only level of involvement. She's not allowed to be involved in kind of other parts of the operation. And at the same time, he was saying, I want to go do my AI course. I want to do all these other trainings, but I don't have time. And I said, well, why don't you send your wife to go do those things? Because it gives her the ownership of that role in the operation. It gives her a sense of purpose and, again, not dead ending her career within the operation. So all of these principles, though they may sound, corporate, they can be applied to this idea of just culture and recognizing someone's value on the operation and connecting human to human.
Absolutely. I know Ash has a lot of ideas on this, so I'll be quick with this response, but you are absolutely right, Emma. A larger scale operation versus a much more smaller scale or family-owned operation are going to function very differently. But I agree with you. I think the principles can 100% apply. To your point about this example with the wife, and dead ending her career. I mean, again, Ash's buckets apply in every scenario here. Maybe we don't onboard because the family's been doing this since everyone was born, right? But why don't we bring our group together and have everyone be a part of reframing what the goal is here, what we're trying to achieve as an operation? Because I would bet more often than not everyone has a piece or a say in what the ultimate long-term goals are. And these businesses do change over time, right? And that's important for succession planning. If you want the family to take over, you're hoping that they're going to be bought in to want to take over, right? And have this generational passing of this wonderful business that you as an owner have put so much of your blood, sweat, and tears and years into, right? But maybe it's okay to let them in to help reshape what that business needs to start looking like in the next decade or so, right? That's buy-in. That's bringing people in and everyone meeting at the table. And when you have that buy-in, and again, the ability for someone to grow, so finding them the opportunity to help that vision continue to evolve, for helping that vision to become a reality by letting them go, seek some credits or seek some training, or having them meet new contacts that come in and help that vision carry forward. I mean, those are opportunities that everyone can play a role where maybe they didn't before, but they're now more involved. And it's this whole feeling valued, feeling part of this, not just doing what they're being told to do and expected to do it the one way or the highway way of doing things, right? I think the ability to respectfully and professionally try to have conversations goes a little bit smoother when everyone that's on board is bought in and feels like they're part of this. They're not just showing up and doing what they're told to do.
Yeah, I think I get asked several questions when I kind of pitch this to people in day-to-day conversation. First one being, what are you doing? The second one being, oh, can you do that with my dad? That's super common question that I've been receiving. And I think, the huge potential in Reach Ag is the scalability. Working with large feedlots that have 20 to 40 staff, or working with a small herd of 45 purebred cows, and it's just mum, dad, and one of the kids, right? Again, in ag, we love to say the big progressive line is we need to start treating this like a business. Well, I don't even know if we need to start treating it like a business. We need to start treating it as a business. It is a business. It's not like a business. Well, buckle up, kids. We're here already. It is a business. So when you're talking about working cows as a family, you're working, just because somebody is your parent or your cousin or your sibling, at that moment in those corrals, you're all employees, you're all managers, you're all working for that business. So understanding that, first and foremost, you're there for the business, but also, gaining a bit of responsibility and understanding the roles and responsibility of everyone involved. The person you were chatting with, perhaps if that wife had a bit of a better understanding in where the cattle were sourced from, understanding what the protocol was that the cattle need to do when they get to the chute, having communication with the vet, and again, sitting in a conference hearing about new protocols and new products that are on the market. All of those small things can create a much better environment when push does come to shove and you are actually in the corrals. It's about that long-term thinking and really setting ourselves up for success over a much longer term than we have been historically.
I want to stick on that business theme and switch gears here. So we've talked about some of the strategies that we can take and put into place. And for the folks inevitably thinking, what's in it for me? Why do this? We've talked a little bit about the animal benefits of it, but what are some other benefits of good culture to a farm, whether that's financially, operationally, some of these other things? And Ashley, you've started to touch on them in kind of your three pillars, but let's dive a little deeper into that.
Yeah, I think financially, when I started writing these programs and developing my systems here, I just about fell over. I was glad I was sitting down when I read this stat, but two main stats. The Canadian Agriculture Human Resources Council says that by 2030, there'll be a job gap of approximately 100,000 roles in agriculture as far as supply and demand is concerned. That's terrifying. We're at a real kind of turning point in what agriculture can look like. It's not just about being able to turn a wrench or rope a calf anymore. It's about how do you program the GPS? How do you run the chute side data collection? What do you do with that data collection once you have a hold of it? So it's really important to understand that the landscape of agriculture and the employees in agriculture are changing. On top of that, the other stat that blew my mind away is that the average cost of turnover for a minimum wage employee is about $39,000. So you turn over 2 or 3 employees in a year, and you're just throwing that money away. So financially, yeah, the benefit of this is massive. Between training, onboarding, hiring, advertising costs, the ramp up time to get somebody to be a fully effective employee. It's insane that $39,000 is that number. It might not feel like that number, but it really, when you break it down, it is. And again, that's a minimum wage employee. So that doesn't even consider if you have a manager that's been working with you for 10 years and has busted themselves to the point where they say, I can't do this anymore, and they move on. There's somebody else out there that's probably going to treat them better. So think about how you're working with those employees, because the financial loss is potentially massive. On top of that, to put it pretty simply, who wants to work somewhere that makes them unhappy? A line that Michelle told me when I visited her in July was, do people not want to work anymore, or do people just not want to work for you? And I think that that's an incredibly impactful line. It's uncomfortable to ask that question. A lot of this is very uncomfortable to have to look in the mirror and realize that perhaps we've made some mistakes in the past, but there is obviously the best time to change is today. The job market's changing, succession is changing, and we can't really rely on those old thoughts of the family values and writing for the brand. We can't use those to get us by anymore. Creating that good culture leads to loyalty and staff retention that money can't buy. So I think the reframing the day-to-day and again, using the opportunities that we have. Everyone talks about the Yellowstone effect and talks about, the tech that's coming into the industry. Let's utilize that. If somebody's really keen and they saw 3 episodes of Yellowstone and they went, wow, I want to go right on the range, why not? I think we take a real kind of gatekeeping approach to that, because there is important cultural values within agriculture, and there is important family values. So it's important to acknowledge that. But they didn't start, everyone had to rope the first calf at one point. So we all had to do it for the first time at some point. So why not help somebody else join the industry, even if they're a little bit older or a little bit inexperienced? The benefit that they can bring, that person that can recode the GPS can perhaps teach you to be doing that while you're teaching them how to saddle a horse. That cross-training potential is just massive.
That was put so beautifully, Ash. I don't know that I can add much more other than, as we think about the future of ag in the animal welfare space, retention is so incredibly critical, because this industry that we have is one of the most noble things that any human could do on earth, right? Is feeding people and providing quality protein. That's so incredibly important for humanity and animals, right? But basically, if we don't realize the importance, finances aside, right, and business longevity aside, this idea of retaining your people despite whatever new tools will come your way, the people you have, you're going to want them to be very well intended, well educated, very skillful, because to Ash's point, they may be now working on mechanical things and equipment, but you're still going to need a very keen person. I always talk about how pen writing or pen walking, it's not just a science, it's an art. And you don't just read that in the textbook. You gotta put enough time in to really call those animals and pull them early on, right? So you can treat them and catch them early, right? So there's a human side to all of this, right? So investing in your people now is only going to help you in the long term, despite what opportunities come to reshape what the workforce can look like, right? But you're going to need people. And I think the benefit of investing in them now is gonna pay just all the benefits in the world, because come what may, the way your workforce looks down the road, whether again it's your family or again this business no longer has family in it, it's now contracted out or whatever, right? The people that are going to run it, you're going to hope that they're going to be high quality, again, well intended and hardworking, and they need to be coming back every day, because to Ash's point, that skill, that experience, that is worth a lot of money and a lot of time, and to replace that can be pretty damning for a business.
I want to jump back to something Ashley mentioned, which was the idea of, it being uncomfortable to look in the mirror and see maybe what are some things we could improve on in terms of people management. And I want to ask, what are some other barriers to adopting good low stress people handling practices, and how can producers tackle them?
Yeah, so in July, I got to, as part of the CYL program, I got to head down to the States and visit Michelle. And I got to do something that still haven't fully wrapped my head around. But Michelle is colleagues with Dr. Temple Grandin, who did develop the way that we handle cattle today. I think that it's not an understatement to say she completely changed the face of livestock handling and livestock welfare. So I got to meet with Dr. Grandin, and we met over breakfast. And while we were talking, I asked her about this exact question in terms of low stress cattle handling. What were some of the biggest roadblocks in that space? Her two main points were, number one, when people saw how effective it was, there was immediate uptake. It was not a hard sell. When you see cattle easily flowing through a tub, or easily walking into a chute, or easily walking up, at a meat plant, it's pretty hard to argue that it doesn't work. The second one was those that didn't pay attention and ignored just got left behind. It became the new standard. I don't necessarily think that low stress people handling is going to change the world tomorrow, but I think that with all the points we've talked about as a changing industry, to continue moving forward, we really need to review how we work with our people and take a good look at how we can be better. We've optimized our livestock and we've optimized our machinery. Now it's time for our people to get the same treatment. And I think, with those roadblocks, again, it's uncomfortable to turn around and have a look at ourselves in the mirror. But I think, hopefully, with programs like what I'm working on with Reach Agriculture, it can outsource some of that stress and outsource some of that pain, and utilize professionals around us to help review what we're doing and help guide us in the right direction of where we can go.
The barriers that I will add here are maybe a little bit of a different approach. And I think that one thing we're lacking, obviously, is resources, right? So this is where I think a program like Ash's in Reach Ag is a gem. And hopefully this is going to be something that many will utilize, and there will be other resources that others can tap into. The barriers that I see are the future of ag, so our future veterinarians, maybe those that plan to go back to the ranch aren't thinking or talking in terms of connecting with people, psychology, culture, and HR principles when we think about animal ag. So I think a lot of the future leaders that will be feeding into the future generations of farming, we really in our academic programs really need to kind of hone in on some of these basic core principles that are probably, I would assume, core to things like business management, being a leader, things that hopefully people pick up as they maybe do internships or they go work a summer on a ranch, watch TED Talks. I don't know, all the different ways that you can try and hone in on these people skills, if you will. But I really don't know that there are a lot of programs out there that are really trying to focus back in on how, especially in a post-COVID world where we've become so much more digitally connected, how do you go back to that human-to-human interaction and make it a lot better? And I especially think that that's important for a lot of our professionals that become indispensable to our farmers, like our nutritionists, our veterinarians, and thinking about how they can better connect and also help managers lead with their workforce and their employees so that they, again, start helping be part of that culture building or that mindset on the farm and helping everyone feel more confident and, again, more motivated to do all these things that are important to that ranch, right? So I think some of the barriers are even outside of the farm and outside of the industry. And I think as the sciences evolve, we're hopefully going to really try and gear our people or future leaders with more of these tools and approaches, or at least the awareness of it, so that when they're then in the field, they can help lead in some of those spaces, or at least be open-minded, right, to consider what resources are out there and bringing them in so they can implement the adoption of them.
Something that really twigged for me there was when you were mentioning nutritionists and veterinarians as people that we outsource things to because we can't be experts in everything. Not all of us are experts in how to set up good culture, especially if, we haven't had one that was presented to us before, if we haven't had someone that was a really great leader for us. So I think knowing that, it's good to reach out to those resources and kind of outsource that or look to learn the way that we would look to learn about nutrition or animal health or whatever it is. It's so important to take that mindset for sure.
Yeah, I think as far as roadblocks as well, talking about kind of that uptake and that investment, I've been finding it difficult to kind of make some of these programs fit, right? Because you're trying to get the management team in one room together while you've got combining going on and you've got arrivals and you've got shipping and you've got a million different things happening at once. But I think being very purposeful about what you're doing, you'll be very purposeful when the cattle buyer shows up at the yard, and you'll drop everything and make sure that you jump up and down and get in front of them and make sure that things are going well. But being purposeful about this is a little more difficult because it's different and it's a newer concept. But if we can take the time and be purposeful and lean into being kind of open and understanding to what's happening here, the change will come, and the change will come at an operational level. And when it comes, when the newer staff that are coming in are getting trained and onboarded correctly, and when the staff that are already there have an understanding of what's happening day to day, I mean, this change happens pretty quickly and pretty drastically in a positive way.
In the interest of being purposeful, Ashley, I think you broke things down really nicely into those 3 pillars before, but let's break it down even further and wonder if you can put into words some small steps that producers could take, say, tomorrow or the really short term, just to get started on building that solid team culture.
Yeah. My 2 points here are regularly scheduled meetings. It blew my mind. I was at an operation recently, and the owner told me that this was the first time that he can remember all of the managers in the same room together. And the conversation that was flowing, it was incredible to see, everyone kind of nodding along, and you had the farm manager agreeing with the cattle manager, agreeing with the feed manager, and everyone kind of going, oh, it's not just my team that's having these issues, it's everyone, and if we all have an understanding of what's going on, that makes it a heck of a lot easier. So setting up regularly scheduled meetings, be it 30 minutes in the morning with just your team, or once a month you do a town hall with the entire operation, or again, if you're talking at kind of a family level, you're meeting once a week in a very purposeful way where you sit down, be it at the coffee shop in town, off the operation, somewhere that's very purposeful and meaningful, to take away all the other distractions and just focus on the point at hand. Bring an agenda. Have someone actually facilitate and run the meeting, and do it regularly and have it scheduled as kind of a non-negotiable. That's something that you can start tomorrow. Again, a little daunting, but once you start to do it, there's some real benefit there. Eventually, you'll find that in those morning meetings, you set 30 minutes aside, 10 of it is talking about what's actually happening during the day, and 20 of it is just increasing personal relationships. It's talking about what happened on the weekend, or talking about what's happening next month, or the concert you went to. That has huge benefit in itself. And then having a clear baseline for your teams. It starts with that good communication, the good onboarding, and good training. It's not uncommon that you see within a crew that you've got somebody who is very highly skilled and sits way above that baseline, and then you have other people that might be below that baseline due to no fault of their own, just a lack of understanding and training. Then you're finding that your really good people are pulling and taking the weight. So as soon as that person either leaves the operation or, God forbid, takes a holiday, things can really fall apart. So getting a baseline and getting a set standard of where everyone is in your operation, so that things can move forward together. So those are my two things: regularly scheduled meetings and having a clear baseline understanding of what it is to be, the level of employee at your operation.
If I could just add another suggestion, this is very simple, is just start thinking about the why. And in everything you do and everything you communicate with anyone on your ranch, lead and end with the why. And just try and see if you can make that shift in how you interact with people, the relationships you have, even on a personal level. I think it can be appropriate, but just trying to frame the way that you interact with people in a different way. And all you have to do is just incorporate that mindset of not just thinking about how I have to get things done, what I got to get done, and by when, but why. And why does this person, and then if you find out, wow, this person doesn't really know a lot of the why, make time to help them and say, you know what, let's get through the day. We'll meet, let's go get a coffee, or let's go meet for half an hour and then go through this step by step. And I will invest the time in you to help you feel better about this, right? Help you understand the why. And I think that really does go a long way in building relationships and helping people not only understand that the culture is important, but that all these things that now my manager is taking time to help me learn, they really do value me. And this is actually a really important thing that I need to get right from here on forward, right? So it's just, I think just changing that tone and approach with people, one can start practicing it and doing it one-on-one. And then I think that will then help generate a lot more of that culture, but then also the relationship building that hopefully a leader or manager is hoping to improve upon.
I remember being a little kid and being told to go fencing and asking why, as most young kids do, and then saying, do you want the cows out on the highway? And I thought, oh, no, I don't. And man, did that make me want to go fencing a whole lot more. So it really is just that simple, basic mentality that makes such a difference. I just want to ask if you guys have any last thoughts to end on.
Yeah, I think that it's exactly kind of to jump on what Michelle just said. It's small change to create big change, which sounds kind of counterintuitive, but it's those little things day to day that'll have such a massive effect on operations. And again, we're talking about making ag a better place to be. We want to continue our legacy. We've worked too hard, and the people before us have worked too hard to let all of this go to waste. And it's there's been too much care and too much heart put into our operations and to the work that we've done. So I think that focusing on those small things day to day will have massive effect, and really leaning into having a bit of self-reflection and looking in the mirror and then moving forward from there. So I think it's all very doable, and I'm obviously very optimistic for what the future of the industry looks like.
So I would leave us with the famous line I like to use when it comes to thinking about animal welfare and our people is challenging the mindset of our industry requires for us to challenge ourselves on, are our problems stemming from a four-legged problem or a two-legged problem, right? And it does take a lot of experience, but also a brave heart to recognize we've got a few two-legged problems around here that we need to fix. And I would challenge anyone that would disagree with me that expands beyond animal welfare. That's just the bare bones for running a sound business, right? And in our industry, we unfortunately just can't run the risk of having things go wrong in-house because We've got consumers that are more concerned day to day with social media and things on hitting the headlines that just don't make sense to people, right? We've got very demanding folks up the supply chain, right? And as an industry collectively, we just want to work, provide protein to the world, and be happy doing it, I think, right? And so in order to ensure that we do that, I think, again, we've got to focus on the two-legged challenges. And I think that by doing that, reaching out to the resources and the tools that are available, but then also bringing in all of our people, again, smaller, large-scale operations to be part of that vision and part of that approach. That's a two-legged approach to fixing those challenges. And I think that that can help us overcome a lot of the more complex areas like animal welfare, down to the more basic ones of just getting everything done as is on our protocols. We just have to do what's on the paper, right? We just have to get it done. So I think that focusing on that two-legged hurdle of farming every single day can really help us move the needle in our industry a lot more than I think many would expect.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you both so much for joining me today and taking the time to discuss this. I know you're both very passionate about it, but I appreciate it as I know you're also really busy too. Thanks for tuning in to this bonus episode of the Simply Verified Beef podcast. Be sure to follow along with us on Facebook and Instagram at Simply Verified Beef. See you next time.